We're taking a step back today to see when number 6 Louisville played against number 5 Nebraska. Now, I know there's been a lot of volleyball matches that have happened since September 18th of 2021, but this actually gives us a better idea of both of these teams because there's a very high chance we could see these teams in the playoffs. For instance, Louisville, very impressive team in the making right now. At least from September 18th of 2021. And Nebraska has some things that obviously need to be worked on. And obviously, as we keep watching film to see how these teams are performing in their conference league, it'll give us a better understanding of who these teams are. The other reason I'm taking a step back to look at these matches is because most of the teams in their conference are not going to be aired as much. I mean, you're not going to see like a Nebraska match potentially up against a non-ranked opponent unless they get beaten by that non-ranked opponent. And Louisville's main competitor this season is going to be Kentucky in their conference as well. So it's one of the very last few top 10 teams playing against each other until at least December. And so with that today, guys, let's be able to talk about when number 6 Louisville went up against number 5 Nebraska. Louisville might have all the pieces that are needed to compete this season. Now, what was very impressive with Louisville was they actually beat Nebraska in 3 sets. They swept them. The scores were 25-17, 25-20, and 25-18. And some key notes to mention for this match for them, it was pretty much the first time that they, as a team, this is like the best start that Louisville has had since 2005. And the other thing, too, was another factor as well is Louisville, for how well they're playing right now, they haven't also been able to beat a team like Kentucky. Even though we're talking about Nebraska, it has to be mentioned that they hadn't beat a team in the top 5 since Kentucky in 2012. So it was kind of a big deal that Louisville was able to do what they did this year, at least that night against Nebraska. I mean, now some key things that need to be pointed out. Louisville has a very good top 3 players on their team. Now, granted, Louisville's a very balanced team in general, and they're able to actually set almost anyone at any time to be able to get the kills that are needed. But some notable players against when they played Nebraska, you have Aiko Jones. She is actually a really dominant player. In fact, I was highly impressed with her for most of this match. Jones had about 21 attempts with 10 kills with only 2 hitting errors. And she had a hitting percentage of 381, for a hitting percentage. Pretty impressive, but that's not the other thing that's impressive too. Being an opposite, she was actually able to help slow down the opposing hitters for Nebraska, and at one point by the end of the match, actually she had about 7 blocking assists for the match. So Jones is very good at being able to hit the ball, and defensively she's really good up on the net, being able to slow down the hitters on the opposing team. Then you have the middle blocker on Louisville named Anna Stevenson, who's also a really great middle blocker for this team. She had 17 attempts for kills with 11 kills in general, and then was hitting at a 588 hitting percentage, and with only 1 hitting error the entire match. And her blocking's so great as well that she had about 4 block assists with 2 solo blocks during the match. And then that third piece I'm talking about, they had outside hitter Anna DeBeer, who's another great player for Louisville. She had about 23 attempts for hitting with 10 kills, did have 6 hitting errors, but her hitting percentage was 174. But she's pretty decent overall for hitting. I mean, she was taking a lot of the pressure during the match, but she also did have 13 digs for the match. So even though she wasn't able to get as high as a hitting percentage, for Louisville, she was making up in the back row defensively. Speaking of defense, Louisville defensively is a very impressive team. They look like Texas in a way. If we remember when we talked about Texas versus Stanford about a month ago, Texas's team was pretty impressive defensively, not only front row but the back row as well. Louisville is, I believe, at the same level defensively as Texas, which is very impressive as a team. So, because Louisville is very patient when it comes to blocking, and even if they do get touches on their blocks, their back row defense makes up for being able to dig the ball. So they remind me a lot of Texas currently right now, and that's an interesting conversation, which we'll talk about in a second. And we had mentioned that the team was very balanced with hitting because at one point the team in general was hitting about 330 for the match for hitting. And their hitting percentages by match were 324 in set 1, .091 in set 2, and then they were hitting 500 on set 3. Very well balanced attacks. The .91 is not the impressive one in set 2, but ironically, Nebraska was hitting .028 in the second set as well. So they kind of balanced each other out in the hitting percentage, even though they weren't very good at hitting that entire second match. Now, Louisville is a very good passing team as well. During the match, they were siding out at one point at a 70% rate on serve receive. That is a very, very well team. If you're able to side out even, I think, at like a 65%, that's a really good number, but they were siding out at a 70%. That's a 5% higher than what's normal. So Louisville is a legit team this season in the making. Now, what makes Louisville also very interesting as well is that Louisville, they have a lot of fifth-year seniors on their team, and that's probably one huge reason why Louisville is so good. And I've been trying to wonder for the longest time why college teams are doing the things that they're doing this season, and the only conclusion I can come with is when they missed most of 2020, they had a chance to bring back a lot of players. And so Louisville in particular is able to bring back a lot of their what would then be graduated seniors to bring them back for their fifth year. And so Louisville, in my opinion, is going to be able to be a really good team come playoff time, just based on the fact that they have a lot of fifth-year seniors on their team who are very well experienced, and they're just more mature as a team in general. Now, the other thing too for how mature of this team is, though, is they do have too much confidence at times. It's kind of one of their biggest downfalls in the making for Louisville, is especially in the match against Nebraska, they'd have times where they were just dominating in every category, and then they would relax because they were just like, oh, we're so good. And then Nebraska would come creeping back in because of Louisville's mistakes of sometimes being lazy on defense or not hitting correctly. Louisville can dominate this season. It helps that they have a lot of experienced players on their team who have come back. But if they don't focus, they can get upset pretty early as well. But I am going to start keeping an eye more on Louisville, because Louisville is going to be one of those teams that everyone should keep an eye out for, just based on solely on the fact that they're very well experienced. They almost play exactly like Texas, both on the net defensively and in the back row defensively, and they're very well balanced when it comes to hitting. So everyone needs to keep an eye out for Louisville, because Louisville is going to do something this season. What that is, I don't know at this time. Maybe it's a Final Four appearance this season. But currently right now, they're a very impressive team in the making, and everyone should look out for Louisville currently right now. Nebraska's story continues to be the same, at least as of September 18th of 2021. The team in general struggles with passing and serve receive. The other thing that is very well noticed, and I'm sure people are going to say in the comments below that I'm very late on making this video, which I'm totally fine with, but Nicklin Hames really needs Lauren Stivrins to come back. Hames and Lauren have a very well deep connection when it comes to being able to have a setter-hitter connection, especially since Lauren is the middle blocker for Nebraska. And Hames seems to trust her a little bit more with offensive burden sometimes. And you can tell that Hames really needs her to come back, because Lauren actually helped Nebraska a lot in a lot of ways when she does return. But that being said, too, Lauren has to stay healthy for the remainder of the season once she comes back, which I believe she did come back, but she does need to stay as healthy as possible for the remainder of the season if Nebraska is going to be able to have any way of being able to compete. Now, Nebraska is going to continue for the time being, even with the return of Lauren, is going to struggle with being able to handle teams that have good blocks and serving in general. Teams that come in mind, I just mentioned Texas with the Louisville side of things, but at the same time, other teams that come to mind are Ohio State and Stanford. Stanford and Ohio State are very good at blocking as well. And in general right now, Stanford's also really good at serve receive, and Ohio's decent at it as well. But if you have teams like Texas, Ohio, Stanford, and Louisville, who are really good at siding out and being able to actually have a really good block and are very aggressive on their serves, Nebraska does not have a chance to make the Final Four this season because they'll have to eventually run into one of those 4 teams in the playoffs this season. Now, ironically, Ohio and Stanford did struggle. They do struggle with their serve, so maybe if Nebraska were to play against Ohio State or Stanford, they have a chance of being able to compete. But we already know Nebraska did lose to Stanford earlier this year, but the difference was that Nebraska wasn't playing with Lauren, and they weren't also playing with Lexi's son as well. So Nebraska at that time is running their freshmen mostly to see how they can perform. So things might be different come playoffs time, but Nebraska does need to worry about teams like Texas, Ohio, Stanford, and now Louisville, because I think those 4 teams are pretty dominant this season, especially when it comes to the defense and serving. But like I said, Ohio and Stanford do struggle with serve sometimes, but they make up with it in their defense. Now, Nebraska, in my opinion, has a chemistry problem right now. And the only reason I say that is there are times on the court where the players defensively for Nebraska do not trust each other. And balls were sometimes dropping. There was miscommunication on the floor. I don't know what it is, but in my honest opinion, I don't think Nebraska trusts each other as a team right now. I don't think Nebraska has had many opportunities to work together. I mean, the coach currently right now, John Cook, I believe, he doesn't know exactly what his starting lineup's going to be. And so with an inconsistency of a starting lineup, you're never going to be able to build that trust in the making. Or maybe that is his plan, is to keep having the girls be ready on any given night so that they have to learn to trust each other. But currently right now, Nebraska just does not seem like they have a chemistry connection with the team right now. And I often wonder if this is going to be a reason why this team will struggle, but it just, in my opinion, I just think the chemistry currently is not there right now. It might look like it on the film, but on the court, it looks a lot different at times. Now, Nebraska's out of system still pretty good. It's allowing them to stay within the match when they play against their opponents, especially against Louisville. Now, but the thing is even though their out of system's pretty good, their in-system still has problems. Their in-system doesn't see the block at times when they are hitting, and that's a huge problem because, like we just mentioned, if they play against a Texas, Ohio State, Stanford, or a Louisville again, those teams are really good at blocking, they're going to struggle all night against any team like that. And the other thing, too, is with their in-system plays, they're only siding out at a 59% rate right now, which means they got to figure out how to get the ball to the floor as fast as possible in order to get that percentage up more. I mean, I think 65 is the average if I'm not mistaken, but 59% is not the best if you're going to be a top team this season. Now, with hitting percentages as well, this is Nebraska's hitting percentages against Louisville. And this is where it's concerning with their defense, or not their defense, with how they handle teams that have really good blocks. Set 1, they were hitting at 116. Set 2, they were hitting at .028. Okay. And then set 3, they were hitting at 286. Okay. This team does not seem like to have the offensive powers they had in the past, but in general, Nebraska does struggle against teams who have really good blocks. And I keep mentioning it because I think that's going to be a thing that needs to be talked about going forward. And I don't think a lot of teams are talking about that. Nebraska struggles against teams that are really good at blocking and defense in general. And the hitting percentage kind of show it right here in the match against Louisville. Now, they do need to continue. Nebraska does need to continue working on their serving and passing. Even though during this match, they only had about 6 missed serves in general against 5 on Louisville. I mean, that's pretty impressive. But when you have a team like Louisville that's siding out at a 70% rate, those 6 service errors kind of are do or die for your team in general. So they got to figure out how to become more aggressive while also being able to keep their service errors down low against teams who are really good at siding out. And it would change the whole dynamic of this Nebraska team moving forward. Final thing with Nebraska, if they go up against any team that's really good at defense, blocking wise, and back row digging wise, and are really good at serving, you can pretty much bet Nebraska is going to be mentally just done. There was one point in the third set where Nebraska just looked like they had lost all confidence in being able to play the game of volleyball, which is something I have never seen Nebraska do in the past, especially with who they have on their team, like Lexi Sun and Nicola Hames. That leadership experience should be able to carry those girls on that team to be able to perform, but it just doesn't seem like they have the mental strength, at least as of September 18th of 2021. And I'm sure John Cook's going to address this with that team, but it's something that does need to be worked on because Nebraska can lose. If you can get into their head mentally, Nebraska's pretty much done for the season. I mean, they might do well in their conference, but if you go up against a team who's really good at just everything at the game of volleyball, Nebraska's going to struggle. And when you get into their head, they virtually just shut down and they just don't look like a dominant team as they should be. So it's going to be interesting going forward with Nebraska to see how they perform after this, especially when we start watching more future films of them. But I'm also curious to know how they're going to perform in December when there's more pressure on them to have to perform against teams who are in their non-conference. So let's keep an eye out for Nebraska, guys, because Nebraska is going to be another interesting storyline to keep talking about going forward on this channel. So yeah, this is going to be, interesting to see how their season keeps going for both of these teams. I expect Louisville to continue to struggle against Kentucky, maybe. And the only reason I say maybe is because Kentucky doesn't look like the same team as they did last season. Nebraska, I expect them to dominate in their league. And this is where their confidence is probably going to have to come in the most in order for them to keep improving as a team. Because once December gets here, I think if you have a Louisville versus Nebraska match again, I think Louisville wins again. And that's potentially even with a return of Lauren as well, and potentially a better Nebraska team in general. So, but it's just a prediction currently right now. But either way, these two teams, we need to keep an eye out for the remainder of the season because Nebraska has to work on their mental capacity, and Louisville is probably going to only keep getting better, especially with all the experience they have. But at the same time, Louisville's confidence could destroy their chances of winning the NCAA tournament when December gets around. So we just need to keep an eye on these teams for the time being because December's only about 2 months away now. So, but it should be interesting the more we keep watching. So with that being said today, guys, if you enjoyed this video content today, I ask that you please like and subscribe to this YouTube channel, as every like and subscription that we get can help grow this YouTube channel in order to keep talking about the game of volleyball. If you enjoyed this content, please also share it with others who you think would enjoy it as well. And with that today, guys, thank you for taking time out of your day to listen. Thank you and goodbye.